Hi, it's Steve and Joe from Freshagenda, and Steve, we're back with a bit of an overview of our latest outlook that went to subscribers last week. We won't bore you with that. And then GDT, and of course Chat of the Week.
Okay, let's get rolling. So we released another monthly outlook last week, a read on the fundamentals, and despite the fact that we managed to stretch that to about 17 pages, we can do it in one page. We put a lot of words around that, and of course a lot of diagrams and charts. So I thought it was simplest to look at the fundamentals and what's bearish and bullish in those, and cutting them into supply and demand. So it's a fairly bearish outlook when you think of the weight of what's occurring here. But I guess demand it's an interesting situation because we've got a market turning south that's turned south, and the fundamentals are certainly well off. Driven, substantially by demand side.
Yes.
By a big pullback, and the weight of China's involvement in trade, particularly the Oceania exposure, is a big part of that. So there's not only a slow recovery in demand, it's milk availability and probably the impact on the necessity to come back and buy ingredients, particularly whole milk powder.
Sure.
Which is a big dampener, and we'll come on to that. The US market is weak with weaker cheese demand. That's pushing fears that we're going to see more oversupply of milk because milk has started to grow. That is improving. Expect to go by the end of the year by as much as 2% year on year.
Yeah.
Because of poor comparables.
Sure.
We got a bit of uncertainty on the sticking with supply, that while Europe is expected to remain weak, and there's plenty of headwinds there with both the quality of feed, the high input costs, the uncertainty of fertiliser, the weather, and the impact of high energy prices, which aren't backing off.
Yeah, especially for powders.
Yeah, for drying. So, that's a big supply side factor that's still weighing on the market. But in the short term, it doesn't matter because we've got prices that are falling, and we'll see that clearly in the way the GDT is being played. The New Zealand season very much in the balance. Still too early to call.
Yeah, it's been a big turnaround from too dry to very much too wet.
So whether it dries out enough to give a good spring start in most regions, and whether or not they're playing with the mix, it's expected there is a bit more skim milk powder and butter coming out of there because of the damage to the whole milk powder demand.
And they will have a bit of capacity, presumably.
You'd think so. Yep.
Spring is not so picky.
Yeah. So that's a really quick wrap.
Yep.
So just as GDT was in the run-up to that.
Are you sure you've changed these charts?
I've changed these, certainly. The ones coming later you're going to be confused about because they look very similar.
Okay.
So we had falling futures prices, particularly with skim milk powder in the run-up to this. Whole milk not as far off, but it was an overread on what actually occurred. So there was better expectations than the actual. GDT Pulse is being launched next week in trial, and volumes were taken away from auction offer volumes. 28,000 tonnes over the full season. It's a fair whack.
Yeah.
But that's going to appear in a different format. It'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. But in the short term, there's some taken out of September volumes, 5,000 tonnes of whole milk powder removed from there. Didn't seem to matter.
No.
Because things went down in this event. Just another bit of, in terms of relative pricing.
Yep.
We've actually got some green arrows there. Yeah, in Europe with both the, it's in US rather, with the butter market still rising, still fairly tight, and in Europe, cheese was continuing to move up across that category. Convergence of pricing in skim milk powder, but daylight in terms of how cheese is being valued between Oceania, Europe, and the US. So the result was very negative again, very similar to the previous. In fact, the chart on the right, the demand in those rounds looks quite similar to last time.
It does.
Only AMF was a bit better than that one, but I think the powders weren't as bad. But we certainly saw heavy falls. Worse this time was butter. Big correction still going on there with quite weak demand. Now these look very similar to the previous event.
They do.
I have changed them. I swear
Take your
I
word
have.
for it.
Yeah, take my word for it. So we're down near the bottom end of experience here. And when we look at these, we see a very similar pattern to what happened in the previous event for whole milk powder. Skim milk powder was a bit better than the last one. Still didn't help. It didn't last long, but it's still very much down the weak end of experience and what it's got to do to actually kick a price up. It's well underneath what's needed. Just the contrast here between this and prior years. These are the volumes being bought by, North Asia, read China. Whole milk powder, we're well below what we've been doing in the past.
Yep.
Same for skim milk powder. They're just moving above the prior year.
Yeah, but with a few events well below, so cumulatively well
volumes
behind.
are well down.
Yeah.
Southeast Asia a lot more positive though.
Yes.
Because they're coming to this auction to take advantage now of lower prices. Demand is still good there, so that is the one region with the potential.
A bit of a bright spark. Yeah.
As economies open up with more travel and tourism, etc. Some interesting relativities, I thought. We see that AMF discount is half what it was 3 events ago, so that's come back quite a bit. And this event, AMF went down only in a minor way. Still broad-based demand for fats across that, and certainly taking advantage of relatively cheap prices. And they'll be talking about this again in Europe, that the difference between the advantage for New Zealand butter is almost $1,000.
Yeah.
Which will be getting, as traders come back, open up their screens, start looking at things, they'll be starting to talk about this factor because butter's cheap in New Zealand. And more on those relativities, convergence on skim milk powder prices at this event. There's only a few dollars in between European and New Zealand medium heat product. Fat is free if you look at
fat is free, yeah.
Skim and whole milk powder exactly the same price.
In contract 2.
Yeah.
Is it?
And that whole milk powder differential to the theoretical, skim and AMF price isn't getting any better.
No.
That's still a very healthy differential there, a very healthy discount. While that Chinese market remains weak, that won't change much. Chart of the week. Joe, what have you got?
Well, the chart of the week in our Dairy Globe newsletter was the all milk price, which shows a fairly healthy margin above where we've been in previous years, or higher than we've been in previous years. We're not talking about margin. But what you've got on the left-hand side is a bit of a different view about what's actually happening to different classes of milk price.
Yeah, because that all milk price we've seen in May was the highest we've seen, and then June's come off just a little. It's going to get a lot worse because Class 3 prices have crashed since then. They're down well under $20 now, so that all milk price will start to erode. So the current projections are that's going to be under $23 by the end of the year. Could easily be worse than that as that flows through into actual declared prices. So US farmers have had the best top line. Their margins are looking a bit better despite that, with corn prices falling, but milk prices are going to come off heavily as we go forward. Okay. What a bright report that was.
I know.
Okay. Well, that's all from us. Thanks for watching. We'll be back again very soon.